Thank you everyone for joining our second panel of the day, Farm Level Economics and Processing panel. Thank you for being here, and thank you to our panel for being here as well. My name is Andria Caruthers. I'm a postdoc researcher in the Center for Agroforestry. My previous work was working with elderberry growers and understanding how they move their berries from the field to the final market. So understanding sort of the constraints and barriers they experienced along the way. And now my position, my role at the Center for Agroforestry is somewhat similar, working in projects within hazelnut and chestnut, looking at grower experiences, current production, projected production, and what their preferences are in terms of post-harvest handling and processing, and using that information to help inform regional processing infrastructure priorities, aggregation, to help inform those priorities as it continues to scale here in the Midwest region. So that's a little bit about me. And specifically, this panel is going to take a practical look at post-harvest handling and processing investments at the farm level, and then we'll scale that into a broader discussion around like aggregation and shared infrastructure at the regional level, and then as well get into a little bit of what types of markets the growers are participating in, how they develop products and in market relationships. So to get started, we will start with panel introductions, and I think Russell, you're going to go first.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody online and in the room there. I'm just going to share my screen here so we can see some slides. Should all be seeing that. Yep, I can see it there in the room. Hi, everybody. I'm Russell Wallack. I'm calling in today from Western Massachusetts, and I farm in New York State. And sorry, I see some motion in the room. Can you hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Great. Okay. I farm in New York State, north of Albany and along the Vermont border with 10 other folks on our team here at Breadtree Farms. And to give you all a sense of kind of where we are today in our business, today we've moved about 300 acres from dairy, so corn, soy, and hay, into organic nut and fruit orchard silvopastures. That's predominantly chestnuts. About 250 of the 300 acres is planted in chestnuts, spaced with wide enough alleys to be able to graze cattle and or sheep, depending on the site. So at one site, we work with an existing rotational beef operation who grazes. That's what you see here in this picture. At our home site on land that we own, we are managing a small lamb operation. And then we're also doing a bit of intercropping. We have trials with seaberry and chestnut intercropping, as well as seaberry and hickory intercropping. And I'd say our longer term ambitions are to either graze or intercrop every acre of trees that we've planted. A little bit more about our business before I hand it over. We work in 3 different ways. I founded the company on a 30-year revenue share lease. For me, as a young beginning farmer who had no cash to buy land, that was the only way I could figure out to plant trees. We've been lucky enough to bring in equity partners who have helped us to buy land, and so that's how we're able to own about 220 of the acres that we manage today. And then the third way that we're getting trees planted out, as Josh talked about in the prior panel, is we're being hired by mostly non-farming landowners who are hiring us on 5- and 10-year management contracts to establish productive orchards. So we're not working in the model of like plant and walk away. Every contract we have is a minimum term of 5 years so that we can get those trees to their productive life. Happy to answer more about this, but I know there's also a question in the intro here about why we're doing this. And I don't know, in the climate that we have in our country right now, I'd say broadly speaking, why we do this is we do think it's economically viable, but we also think it's worthwhile for us all to be, as humans, taking on projects that we think make the world a better place and the world we want to live in. And I'd say fundamentally that is what Breadtree is trying to do. Thank you.
I am Stephanie Sharp. I'm from Glen Ridge Hazelnuts. We're located in St. George, Ontario, Canada. We have about 60 acres of hazelnuts planted. I'm not sure if I can go to the next slide. There we go. Thank you. So we took on this venture in 2016. That's when we started planting our orchard. Our oldest trees are from 2018, but we did start with drip irrigation, and from there mapped out our orchard. We have approximately 70 acres planted, which is around 15,000 trees. About 35 acres of that is in production currently. We decided to go into hazelnuts because we have had a farm. We also have a row crop operation where we do corn and soy. But one of our farms is extremely hilly, which is the farm we decided to plant the orchard on, which a lot of our row crop equipment would constantly break. It wasn't a great yield on that farm, so we were looking for other avenues. Hazelnut seems promising as a per acre investment compared to what you would get from row crops. There was also encouragement from our provincial government, and then also the research from New Jersey going into Eastern filbert blight resistant varieties, more winter hardy hazelnuts. And as 6th generation farmers, we were just looking for something that would encourage future generations to stay on the farm, what could sustain our family farm for the future. And I think there's one more slide. So this year we had about 55,000 pounds of harvest. The previous year was 22,000 pounds. So as the trees come into maturity, that'll continue to grow year over year. We've invested in processing equipment as the larger operation in our area. We recognize that we would need to do that. We do share that we process for other growers in our area as well. And I think we'll probably get into the details of our processing equipment in the next questions.
I'll let the slides catch up, but I'm Jeff Allen, and along with my wife and our 2 daughters and their husbands operate Valley Chestnuts in southeast Iowa. We have just over 5,000 trees, over 60 acres, relatively young, ranging from just 2 years up to 8. But also on the farm, we put a full processing line as well as a fulfillment operation together. And as we were impatiently waiting, I guess, for our orchard to produce, we started buying and reselling nuts from other growers in our area. And right now have about 25 growers in the Iowa, Illinois, Missouri area that we sell almost exclusively direct to consumer. Additionally, on our farm, we've ventured into agritourism a little bit. We've started some U-pick operations just this past fall. We also have 10 acres of elderberry that we have a few value-added products. We bring folks in for what we call our elderflower picnics. And also, we last spring opened a greenhouse where we're raising chestnut and elderberry plants, seedlings and plants for our own use, but also to resell to other growers.
Yeah, and I got to introduce myself earlier as Josh Payne from Stacked Agroforestry. I'm up here in a little different capacity this time as a simple farmer an hour to the west of here. We took over a family farm with my grandfather. Somehow we ended up with a 90-year-old man's blessing to plant chestnuts when he had spent his entire career taking them out. His life advice for me is they will still make bulldozers in 30 years, which is always good. So right now we started with about a 15-acre chestnut orchard. We have about 60 acres of chestnuts planted. We converted from corn and soy because I found out I'm allergic to herbicide. It has the potential to kill me if I'm exposed to it. So we don't think that's a great option. So now we organically manage our 600-acre farm largely through sheep grazing. And our goal, kind of like what Russ was saying, is to turn all of it into, over the next 3 or 4 years, all of this into like a chestnut silvopasture. So we're started, we're going, but also like what I'm hopefully going to talk about a little bit is just some economics of animals, because I really think animals can cash flow orchards without well. We were talking last night. There's no subsidies for tree planting in Canada. Like I didn't realize that. So we're trying to figure out what is a free market option for getting chestnuts or some of the sort of tree crop in the ground. And honestly, sheep cash flow pretty well. Pigs do it even better. That's kind of the avenue that we're working through the tree and what I kind of bring today to this table.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So for our first question, this is for Stephanie and Jeff. So Stephanie, you can take it first. What post-harvest investments have you made so far, and what compelled you to make those investments?
So we have a cleaning and drying system on the farm. We recognized early on that we were the larger growers in our area, the largest in our province. And what we were doing by hand just wasn't sustainable for how much you grow for the first 10, 15 years as they reach maturity. So I think the first 2 years, we probably had a few hundred pounds that we would do by hand. We would clean them in buckets of water, sanitize, and dry them out. But we recognized that wasn't sustainable. So we were able to get some small grants to purchase processing equipment. So we have a cleaner and sanitizing set up, and then that goes into drying because hazelnuts need to be dried. So our dryers are actually from a peanut farm nearby. So they're old peanut wagons with a perforated floor, and we put some heat on them, and it takes about 3 days to dry around 5,000 pounds. Our processing equipment can currently hold about 1,000 pounds per hour. So we can get quite a bit done, and it's able to keep up with the orchard as well as other growers in the area. This year, I believe we processed around 100,000 pounds, 55,000 of that being our hazelnuts, and then the other half of that being from other growers around Ontario. And then from there, we have a cracker, which is probably our biggest bottleneck. I should mention our cleaner is from Italy, and then our cracker is also from Italy. And then we have recently invested in an optical sorter. So that uses the AI technology to sort the hazelnuts. It sorts the shells from the kernels, and also will sort out any moldy kernels, which we recognize also that having a good, clean product was really important to ensure that our customers recognize our hazelnuts as quality hazelnuts. We didn't want to give anyone any reason to not purchase locally because our market is our local consumers. We do some wholesale, but to Quebec, and then from there, it's more local consumers. So just ensuring quality was our number one priority.
Yeah, we, as knowing we had 5,000 trees, we actually have plans for more. We knew we had to come up with some processing capability of our own. So that inspired mainly my father-in-law to design a processing line, which in a sense, it's not as processing line as much as it is a cleaning line and a sorting and bagging line. But we go through a chestnut float tank where you can pull off the floating nuts, which are the defects typically, through a washer, which is mainly a rinser. It takes the sanitizer off from the first tank into an inspection table, then through a sizer, and then into a bagging system where we bag nuts and then put them in cold storage before we ship them a few days later. A lot of the motivation was to be prepared when our nuts come into full production, and also to knowing that labor is always tough. Being able to mechanize and being as efficient as possible when that time came was really the motivation.
And for Russell and Josh, this next question is directed for you. Thinking about scaling up, what factors or catalysts have guided your decisions about what to harvest, or what to invest in and when?
You starting, Russ?
You got it. You got a mic in front of your face.
Yeah. So we're our orchard is early successional, right? And so we're starting to look through what it looks like to do what Jeff did. Like we're having the exact same conversation, probably 2 years behind you, which is one of the benefits of this. I get to learn from Jeff and Roger and like people who are a lot farther along than this for us. But right now, I think like our harvesting processing strategy is called Children. We have an 11-year-old who drives a 4-wheeler around. Don't tell anybody that. I just did. And she picks up all of them every day after school. We bring them in. She washes them, sorts them. We do them all by hand. That's fine, like what you're saying, for a couple of years. It's not going to be fine very, very soon. And so that's where so we luckily have the infrastructure that we can invest like quickly and cheaply. So we have the research from Brian Weber, whose name keeps getting brought up all day. So like, they've done a lot of that stuff. And so we feel like we have the ability to go in and turn something around very quickly, and the network and the resources. So like really, we're trying to invest in people who know, like people like Russ, who are going to be ahead of us, like in the processing, like turning stuff into like finished goods. So if we can invest in people and knowledge, that's going to help us get to where we need to be very soon.
I think for us, really two pieces of our kind of investment philosophy as a business have been, one, don't buy something until you know you need it, and don't take on debt unless you absolutely have to. Something a pretty successful entrepreneur said to me once, which is quite obvious, but it's also something that a lot of us ignore, is that every business that fails for the exact same reason, which is that it runs out of cash. And taking on debt for equipment equipment or land or other investments that isn't going to pay you back faster than the debt you need to pay on it is a really easy way to lose your business. So similarly to what Josh just said, we're always asking, like, what can people do in a better way or in a way that works better for our business than the equipment that we may need eventually, and also trying to look kind of at the appropriate timelines to be investing in the equipment, where it's not too late, but that we're also not paying for that equipment before it's really delivering value to the business. And I would also say that one of the things we've learned along the way that I definitely didn't realize going into that kind of investment strategy is that there's a secondary effect that I think is pretty hard to measure, where if you lean into people before, let's say, CapEx investments, is that people talk about your project, people become loyal customers, people become the other young farmers in your community who are planting these trees and building that industry. And I think sometimes in business, it's very easy to think about buying something as being valuable, and it's often also quite easy to underestimate the value of investing in other human beings in the body of work that you're trying to create. And I would say that's become pretty foundational to our business is how many people can we get planting trees or, handling nuts at harvest or interacting at a farmer's market, because that's how we build the story of this work. And I think that's a pretty important part of our investment strategy. And then the last piece is when you can get the government to give you money to do work that you were going to plan to do anyway, you should sign up for that. So right here, this is not AI, despite the lighting kind of making it look like AI. That's a former seed potato barn on our home farm. And we got a USDA grant in 2024 to convert that into a chestnut processing facility. That'll be both handling of fresh nuts and also processing to make dried, shelled, and milled products. And that's not an investment we would have chosen to make in 2024, but given the amount of funding that we were able to secure under the Organic Market Development Grant for an explicitly organic handling and processing facility, it seemed worth kind of making the jump given that opportunity. And so I think also just being able to say yes when there are good opportunities in front of you is another key aspect of our investment approach.
I love that response, investing in the people in your region and in your community. Do you have any tips for growers to really start sort of building that human capital, like how you did it in their regions, how to build those partnerships and relationships with people?
Yeah, I will say it doesn't come without its own risks. I mean, for example, bringing people to your farm has liability risks. And so making sure you have the right insurance policies, for example, before you bring 100 people out to plant trees is wise. Um, for us over time, some of it was organic for us out of like not having all that much cash when we got started and it being easier to have a 20-person work weekend with other young farmers who are eager to plant trees and do it, on an hourly basis than to have a whole farm team. But then we kind of learned from that experience that we just, even as we've developed to having 9 folks salaried, that we still want to have opportunities for folks to come out and learn about our work hands-on. So we've committed to every year doing a community planting day. I think the caveat I'd give is know that the quality of planting labor you're going to get at your community planting day is not the same as folks who have planted thousands of trees themselves. So don't overcommit what you're asking your community to do. Really like see it as a engagement opportunity, not a work opportunity. But I see a comment about the government funds not being a handout. I totally agree. It is doing work to support agricultural industries that work for our entire country. Thank you for that comment. But yes, that's how we're investing in our folks in our region.
You have anything to add, Josh? Or
No, I mean, like similarly, like we lean on church groups often, often not to do the planting because, like Russ said, you end up with some wildly varying issues, and like there's just a time element. If it's gonna be wet or dry when people come out, so a lot of times we get people to help do tree maintenance, whether it's around trees, whether it's like prepping for the next site or whatever. But like the value in that is like we just continually people have those same groups asking to come back out, and they're bringing more people and more people. And there's that's just a added market, but that's also just growing interest in a field that not many people know about.
wonderful. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next question on processing workflow and strategy. I want to start with Stephanie and Jeff. How do you move the nuts from farm to the customer? And can you kind of walk us through your post-harvest workflow from harvest day to customer's hands?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, from harvest, we go into our cleaning and drying process. And then from there into our cracker, and then from cracking into sorting, and then into bagging. We do the benefit with hazelnuts, which we're realizing because we didn't know much about chestnuts, is that you can store them. So we are able to store hazelnuts for up to a year. We do have just a sea can in our shop that has a humidifier in it, and it keeps it cool and at the right humidity. So as we are going through that cracking process, because it can take weeks or months to get to fulfill an order with cracking and bagging. And then from there, we also, in addition to our wholesale market, we also have our value-added products. So we have a small on-farm kitchen that we purchased, a really small roaster and a candying machine, and we also chocolate hazelnuts as well. We did at the beginning, we were going to our local kitchen, roasting hazelnuts in the oven, doing very small amounts in a whole day. But we recognized that this was an industry that people were interested in. We sell them mostly to local farm stores. We don't have a store on our farm yet, but we're hoping to in the future to engage people in coming to the orchard. And then we also sell online, so direct to consumer.
Repeat that question, would you please?
Can you walk us through your post-harvest workflow from harvest day to customers' hands?
Yeah, about 15% of what we processed last fall was from our own farm. Everything else came from other growers, and it's really pretty much handled the same. For the moment we receive the nut, we will do a gross weight, immediately get them in the cooler. Chestnuts are extremely perishable. You're losing weight the moment it falls from the tree. We let them cool down, a day or two, and we bring them into the processing center. We, like I explained earlier, we float them, sanitize, wash, inspect, which is a manual. The inspection line's a manual process. I need to hear more about the optical inspection. And we started off, one thing we learned, it's probably a question for later on, but initially we bagged everything to prepare to ship. Well, if they sit in the cooler then for another week or so, you've lost weight. So now you're opening up these bags and adding chestnuts before you can ship them. So we've kind of transitioned to putting them right back into bulk storage. And then all of our orders come in through to the internet, all online sales. So we just export our orders into our shipping software. It generates a shipping label and a packing slip. We go down, we ship, like most chestnut operations, ship early in the week so that they don't get stuck at the post office over the weekend. But the weekend before, the Monday we ship, we will label all of our boxes, put the packing slip inside, and get ready, for Monday morning when we bring the nuts out of the cooler, box them up, put them on a pallet, take them to the post office. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Great. One of the follow-up questions was what are some of the biggest learning curves that you've sort of learned or managed along the way?
Well, one I mentioned, I guess. Even if you think you have the optimum storage, they're still going to shrink. So we, again, take them back into bulk storage before we'll bag them. We probably would have set up the processing line slightly differently if we had known that, because we kind of have to reintroduce the nuts back into the processing line. But it can be overcome, and there's always room for improvements.
Anything to add, Stephanie?
I would say our learning curves are probably realizing the investments we needed to make in the equipment, just because the manpower it takes to sort through hazelnuts is pretty extensive. So it would take us almost a year with 2 people working full time to sort through with what we can do now in probably a week. So just learning what equipment we needed when, doing a lot of research, and we're still learning. A lot of it is just kind of pieced together. So over time, there will be things that change.
Thank you. All right, so looping back in, Josh and Russell, for the next question, sort of zooming out to like the regional level, as production grows or you multiply that workflow across like dozens of growers in a region, what are your thoughts on how regional aggregation, shared processing infrastructure can help solve future bottlenecks?
Yeah, I mean, from the tree planting side, just in like probably a 60-mile radius of my house, we've already planted 100 acres outside of our place. So we know we know right where we are, there's going to have to be a hub. There's going to have to be some sort of a place to aggregate. Now, like Russ and I were talking the other day, the question is how much of that happens on site? Because some of those things can be modular and can happen on site. Some of those things need to happen wherever the aggregation center is. But a helpful number that I heard from, I think it was Ron the other day, is that the one that you went to see over there in France, Brian, it can work between 200 and 500 acres, which is a big swing in my mind. But so it's like, I'm trying to think through this like acres of chestnuts from on one hand, and it's like if there's a couple hundred acres or 300 acres of chestnuts, you need a hub in that area. And then the marketing stuff comes later, in which have to figure out how to sell those, right? But yeah, that's at least the marketing side of that. And just can I throw something on the last little bit? So like we're on a very low scale in terms of just processing our stuff. A couple small things, just a simple 3-bin stainless steel sink. If you're a small chestnut producer, can go a long ways. And we've stopped investing in like expensive walk-in coolers for right now. What we're doing is we're buying a $30 thermostat that we can put on a chest freezer. And that's getting us by for a little bit right now. It's cheaper. We don't have to pay $500 for a HVAC specialist to come out and fix that. So just a small little individual processing thing.
Just to reiterate, the question for Josh and I was about kind of the aggregation side of things and how we're thinking about that.
Yes, just how you think about that. And then let's see, just sort of as production increases in a region, what are your thoughts on how regional aggregation, shared processing infrastructure can help solve future bottlenecks?
Yeah. For us, we're very much kind of in the heart of thinking about that right now. One of the reasons we applied for the grant that we applied for is it was specifically focused on commodities that are underproduced organically in the US. And so the last data point I saw from the Savannah Institute report a few years ago was that I believe less than 1% of chestnuts are produced organically in the US. And we already import a substantial majority of chestnuts that are consumed in the US. So we made the proposal for that grant and for our facility based on two things. One, that there's an underproduction of organic chestnuts in our country, and also that within our region, which is defined as a 400-mile radius under USDA, I would guess there has been something like 40 to 60,000 trees planted in the past 7 years. And there is no processing infrastructure of any scale, as far as I'm aware of, east of Ohio, or northeast of Ohio, I guess I should say. And so when we're thinking about it, first of all, we're in a region where chestnut weevil is endemic. And so that creates a lot of nuance to how we think about aggregation. So even though we will be doing hot water weevil treatment at our facility, if we have a grower who wants to aggregate with us for the sake of going to market or wants to sell fresh nuts to us that we're processing into dried products, we have to think with them about what frequency are they going to be making deliveries, or are we going to be doing pickups from their farm, and are they going to be responsible for a hot water treatment with sufficient regularity. Say if we're doing weekly drop-offs, are they going to be doing hot water treatment every 24 hours? And that starts to make that system not look like one facility in one place that everything comes to, but more of like a hub and spoke model with these, let's say, weevil treatment nodes and then a design delivery frequency off of that. And I don't really have an answer, but I can say that we're actively thinking through it and also trialing basically different scales of weevil treatment. So we have a very small scale approach that we're doing right now because of where we're at in terms of production, that we put about 3,000 pounds of nuts through this year. And that's using multiple sous vide circulators and stainless steel sinks. That is not what we will do with our facility going forward, but like that can serve a 5 to 10,000 pound operation, I'm pretty sure. So, for the local veg grower who's doing an acre or two of chestnuts and then aggregating with us for going to market, a solution like that might work a lot better than actually using the, 2,000 pound throughput option that we're going to build into our facility. So that's kind of how we're thinking about aggregation, is like what step of handling and processing happens where, and what kind of frequencies does that create within the network in terms of deliveries and running the whole system.
That kind of touches on one of my follow-up questions, which was sort of what are the like rules of engagement, so to speak, for coordinating these systems to sort of avoid like competing or redundant systems in regions.
Um, are you saying like legally what are the rules, or are you asking?
That's figure of speech. Like, what do
Yeah.
you like? How do you see coordinating these systems? And you kind of touched on it. How do you see coordinating these systems, like at a regional level, to avoid like
Yeah.
redundant systems or more
Yeah.
complicated?
So I guess one example I'll give, no one in our region, there aren't really any formal agreements yet because most of the facilities are still in build out. So like there's a fairly sized facility in the Finger Lakes. There's also a fellow farmer in the Connecticut River Valley in Massachusetts is building a facility. And I think some of the discussions are about like who's doing what. So thinking about fresh nut handling as separate from, for example, building out a business around flower products. Um, there's obviously regulations around like price coordination so that you're not, being coercive in the market. But I'd say it's kind of an open discussion for us about what works best for all farmers. And I think one thing that we're open to long term is, while it's our business that's building this facility, is like if in the long term a cooperative model is what actually suits the success of the region, it's something we're open to. It's just for us, we had kind of a huge level of liability in terms of the scale that we've planted out trees. And so we just need to make sure that this facility actually gets built, and doing that in a cooperative structure initially didn't seem like the best option. But if in 10 years that's the right option for the region, it's something our team has discussed being open to. So I'd say none of it's set in stone yet.
Um, Moving on to the next question about markets, and this is for everybody. Take us through the evolution of your product offerings and sales outlets. What did you start with? What do you emphasize now? And what have you learned in between? And we'll start with Stephanie.
So I'll start with our wholesale part of our business. Initially, we thought that in-shell hazelnuts, and from what I heard, Oregon does a lot of in-shell hazelnuts, but is also recognizing the need for kernels. So that was a learning curve, was that we needed to invest in a cracker relatively quickly because the market is in the kernels. And then on the other side, we do have the value added component, which we are seeing over time a better response to those. We're definitely growing in the last year. We started a website and social media is really big with those. So social media is huge for the growth, not only of our industry, of our business, and then also of value added. So just getting word of mouth out there that these are available in Ontario, candying them, chocolating them. You can also, there's lots of opportunities there for value added.
Our product offering hasn't evolved. It's fresh chestnuts. we start off trying to determine the size of the bag to sell, and we kind of backed into that by a good economical box size to ship. Came up with 7.5 pound bags. If you want more than that, you buy two 7.5 pound bags, and if you want more, you buy three. And we just haven't evolved from that. We toyed with it, trying to sell smaller quantities, and just we did upside. I guess this year I should back up. We did start selling 25 pound bags online because it was a bumper crop. We had to move more nets, but quite honestly, our product offering hasn't evolved.
Yeah, and just I mean, fresh chestnuts are great, right? Just a couple things. So one, we turn a lot of our chestnuts into trees that we're going to plant on our farm. So then, the chestnut side of the business will sell the tree or will sell a chestnut to Stacked Ag. Stacked Ag will grow that and plant and we'll, buy it back essentially on paper. So that's a nice kind of beginning for us. That's context specific, probably not for everyone. The other thing that like just hasn't been mentioned. So I think we were talking about this last night. I was listening to a podcast one day while I was building fence, and it turns out there's some people who planted a heck of a lot of chestnuts in the United States. And I spent a whole day just spiraling because I'm like, man, this cottage niche industry that I thought was going to be very profitable at 30 acres is, what's going to happen to the market there, right? But then after I got through my spiral, I realized like that's what has to happen for an industry to become mature, right? And so the realization here is that I'm gonna have to move towards also value added stuff like Russell, and so I'm excited about that. Like we're working on a chestnut whiskey right now. You can place orders with me if you want to, but not really. It'll be years in the development. But then the other one that I'm excited about for the processing facility is like there's going to be a waste stream there, and we have pigs, and so if we can aggregate things and we can probably then offer a better price to people who bring their chestnuts to us, because if there's 5 to 15% waste or something that we're not going to sell fresh, those can get turned into high value pork. And so that's something also as an industry you got to think about. What are we going to do with our waste? You were talking like hazelnuts are 60% waste or something like that last night. Is that the right number? And I'm like, what's the pig nutritional value on that? And so yeah, that's like those are kind of where my mind's going with that.
Russell,
Yeah.
you're doing cool stuff with the mill.
Well, yeah. So today we do not have a functional mill. So first off, I'd say we've been able to do diversification largely because we're building on the work of many others in this space. For example, Greg and Amy Miller have done a lot of R&D to allow us to be able to sell chestnut flour today. So we're actually buying wholesale from them and able to sell that so that we can be engaging restaurants and bakeries in the Northeast in starting to help them understand the value around chestnut flour. So very grateful in terms of the R&D work and the business work that many folks whose shoulders we're all standing on have done over the past few decades. So I'd say one way that we're exploring the market is selling both a fine and a coarse flour that we're sourcing from Amy's work. And I'd say the demand and the response to that has been pretty overwhelming. I mean, at one event this year, we served lamb ragu with our silvopastured lamb over a chestnut polenta. What I often tell folks is that polenta originally was inclusive of chestnuts, right? Corn is not native to Italy. So up until the 1500s, it was more like buckwheat and chestnut blended. And we had folks like almost in tears trying that food, the way they felt satiated by this kind of integrated system and the staple foods it could produce was truly an emotional experience for some of our customers this year. And so I think in terms of kind of how we're thinking about market, what's key to us is not just thinking about ourselves as a chestnut farm, but really thinking at a landscape scale about what foods come off an integrated, kind of an ecologically optimized approach to working with our diverse Northeast landscape. So we're investing in native hickory plantings, thinking about that as an oil bush using the bitternut or yellow bud hickory. We are producing maple syrup in the woodlands, in the uplands in this picture, grazing lamb, and then also experimenting with things like could we long-term use a lot of the seedling and wild apples that grow in our landscape for a vinegar product, and thinking about how do we actually really think of ourselves as a food business that's creating pantry staples from tree and perennial systems and think about it more like that and less like all we have to sell is chestnuts. And I think that's specific to the North, or like I would say I'm not advocating that every farmer in the country should do that. I'm saying in the landscape that we're working in, there is an opportunity for us to be doing that. And increasingly, I'd say that's the story that we're telling around our work, and the work we want to be doing.
Thank you. And another follow-up question for you all is, how did you initially start building your customer base? What I know you have a new website, Stephanie, and just sort of wondering how your each approach to building and marketing to and interacting with customers in your region.
I guess it started out with a lot of cold calling. You just find, for hazelnuts especially, chocolatiers, bakeries, and all the sweets, and you just call around and let them know that you exist. There was no hazelnut industry in Ontario, so a lot of working with other growers. We're lucky that the community we have developed, we all work together very well. There's a few of us that share customers. If, say, they can't fill an order, then we'll buy their nuts and fill the order, or vice versa, buy our nuts and they can fill an order. And then also social media. We've figured out social media is huge. As farmers, we didn't like to hear that. That's definitely not our strong suit, but it's something we've recognized, and we can even see the changes in purchases. We do a lot of holiday boxes and gift packs and stuff. So when we start to post with those, we can see the uptake in the purchases online. And then a website as well really helps with direct to consumer, and just communicating with local farm stores, staying on top of them, making sure their orders are fulfilled.
Yeah, we pretty much all website based. Generated our website back in 2019, and have just grown through however that internet works in the background, right? As far as the algorithms and what people search for and how they find you, and just develop. You always to get their email address when sign up here type of thing, and just having a mailing list, an extensive mailing list come harvest time, so you can pull the trigger and say, hey, the chestnuts are ready. And quite honestly, fresh chestnuts at the scale we're at now sell themselves. There's no arm twisting. We try very hard to sell a high quality product, keep it refrigerated from the moment we pick it up until it goes out. And once we process, we put it back in the cooler for a couple days before we ship it, so they're cold when they the best as possible, until they get to the consumer. Priority mail gets it there in 2 or 3 days, anywhere from 2 to 3 to 23, depending on the postal service. But and that's, again, it's a quality product. Chestnuts sell themselves at this scale. We started just this past year started looking into more wholesale markets, and haven't really got those established. Plan to. I think we got some good leads in Chicago, but it's still, everything's direct to consumer at this point as of last year.
Yeah, and so again, we're early successional, right? So tree planting for us has largely just been word of mouth. Somebody was giving me a hard time. I don't even think you can find our website right now. And I'm listening to you talk. It's Like my wife has been telling me all these things, all these like for the last several years. And I guess maybe we should listen when it comes to starting to market chestnuts, right? But we started like in the meat stuff or in the meat side of things at a farmer's market. And it was great, right? Post COVID, it was really nice, super easy to move stuff. And then as we moved out 4 or 5 years, we found that there was the trend of people starting to bulk at the prices of, say, grass finished beef or lamb. But they weren't bulking at the $10 donut that they bought right next to us. And they would come over and complain, $10 for a pound of ground beef. And we're like, but you just bought that donut, right? And so we saw these people, like we saw our customers starting to move away in our area anyway, from buying staples at farmers markets into more of an experience. And so our decision in the meat world as we move through this with pigs, and honestly, it bodes well, I think, for chestnuts, is that people like consumers right now are like tending towards convenience, especially people in my phase of life who are buying a lot of groceries. Like we're running to soccer games and basketball games, and there's less and less time to do that. So like chestnuts fit that really well. If they can just show up at your door in a 25, no, not 20, in a 7.5 pound bag, even better, right? There's like that's like that fits that plan really well, and I think that fits consumer moving moving into that well. So that's our plan for the future.
Russell?
Yeah. I think again, we're early days and still learning, but I think some of the things we've learned, I agree that chestnuts sell themselves to some extent, but I think what we also found at in-person markets, for example, is we had a lot of folks, and I count myself as one of them, who have had actually pretty bad experiences with roasted chestnuts. I don't know. I know this maybe is the wrong place to say this, but there's a lot of bad roasted chestnuts if people don't know what they're doing. Especially in my experience, more folks who have encountered more Castanea sativa. And so we learned at least in terms of our experience with customers at markets this year, giving away free samples of our roasted chestnuts. And we put a lot of time into testing out exactly how do we want to be roasting chestnuts in a market context, and giving someone a sample so that they could see how easily the nuts that we're growing are peeling, how sweet they are, kind of, in my experience, roasting, you can get quite a varied degree of moisture content depending on how high heat you roast. And so giving people an actual chance to experience the food was a huge conversion opportunity for us in person. And so for us, it's thinking about like, yes, we're getting a lot of online demand, and what's the limit on the online demand of people who are already excited about chestnuts, and then what opportunities do we find to get more people excited about chestnuts who don't even know that they could be or have had an adverse experience and need a good experience. And so I think we're doing a bit of strategizing on even just thinking about both farmers markets and holiday markets as an opportunity for that. Not even necessarily like the marginal profitability of what we sell in that day, but how many web consumers do we get out of each bag of roasted nuts that we sell. And then I think the other one that I have just found interesting is when I look at our web search data in terms of impressions on our website, we actually get far more impressions of people asking questions about how to prepare, how to cook chestnuts, what recipes to use with chestnuts, how to use chestnut flour, than where do I buy chestnuts? And I just find that interesting that it seems like this isn't even necessarily where we fall in that traffic, but just impressions, meaning that someone searched it and your website was anywhere in the list. There tend to be more impressions in our experience about people asking questions about this food and not necessarily looking to buy it. So in terms of when you think about how you build a website or what content you focus on creating, it actually seems like more the culinary and kind of culture and storytelling side of it is actually where there's kind of a dearth of information right now, or an opportunity for us all as growers to be doing better communication. And that's something else that we're thinking about like how do we invest in more recipes and videos so that folks can get excited about the food that we all grow.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question, then we'll get into questions from the audience. Where, for your respective tree crop that you grow, where do you see the chestnut or hazelnut market in 5 to 10 years? And what advice would you give to new or beginning growers who are maybe thinking about entering production? And we'll start with Jeff.
I wish I knew, right? No, we had this talk yesterday a little bit, and it seems there's a ton of excitement out there. The crop has an emotional connection for a lot of the population that buys it, mainly ethnic populations. We definitely have work to do to introduce a whole new generation of people to chestnuts. I, for one, did not know what a chestnut was 10 years ago, and I bet we raised hands out. There's a lot of folks that, 5 years ago didn't know what a chestnut was. That's has to happen, I think, for the next 5 years to be positive, because there's a lot of nuts or seedlings and trees have been planted. There's going to be a lot of nuts coming to market in the next 5 years. And unlike a hazelnut that you can dry, profitability of chestnuts is on fresh chestnuts.
Well, for hazelnuts, in our area, and even from the map that Ron had showed earlier, I think in our area, there's a lot of opportunity for growth. We're always excited to hear about new farmers. We definitely see a lot of positive responses from our buyers. There's always people reaching out looking for hazelnuts. We have a buyer that we foresee and hopefully continue to have, but they are looking for more than what we can even produce. And they're so excited about local. Quebec in particular loves hazelnuts. So, just as far as advice to a new farmer, I would say prioritize orchard management. I think we heard that a lot on the last panel. You can't just plant the trees and walk away. You really have to plan it out, think about the future. But yeah, I think that would be number one. And if you do it right, the customers will come.
Yeah, and so as we're thinking through this in our farm, we're always thinking through all of our industries, whether it's chestnuts or pigs or sheep, in terms of like 3 levels of marketing. We're always wanting to make sure that our industries or each of our enterprises is profitable at a wholesale level. So like with sheep, we know that that's going to be a livestock auction. We know about how much we're going to get, and so then we can do our calculations on a wholesale level. And then if we can take those and we can direct market and add on top of that in a way that also pays for our time, which is the tricky part about the farmers market, then that's a different layer, right? So for us, we're thinking through wholesale profitability, and then kind of that mid tier is grocery stores, particularly like for us, like grass-fed meat procurers or groceries as you're thinking like that middle sale wholesaler, and then of course, is direct consumer. And we're always trying to make sure that we have all 3 of those. But we know that if we can base our tree planting, our enterprises based upon the idea that a wholesale is profitable, we know we're not going to lose our business. So that's kind of how we're kind of processing that.
In terms of lessons learned, the one thing I say to folks, because we get a lot of excited young farmers coming to us, given kind of like the profile of our plantings in the Northeast. And when I started this, my plan was that I would have a full-time job until probably between year 10 and 12 of an orchard that I had funded on credit cards. So like I don't really tell people they should do this. I say, like, are you sure you want to work weekends for the next 10 years? In order to make this work, unless you have significant inherited wealth or some other way to make this work. So I'd say, one, really make sure you kind of understand what your multi-decade commitment is, and that I don't know, I think in this work there's so much value to just actually gaming out what you're signing up for. Like, not even thinking about how hard is it going to be to plant the trees. Think about, like, do I want to do this activity that I'm basing my farm on 10,000 times in the next 20 years. Like if you're thinking about pruning or if you're thinking about what tree tube you're using. Um, and I think the other thing with regard to that that I found super helpful was I just tried to learn everything I could before I was a farmer. Like I went and harvested from random 40-year-old Chinese chestnut trees and did time trials on how quickly can I harvest by hand so that I could have even a sense of like even if I never mechanized, if I managed 100 trees, how quickly could I make that harvest happen? And was that worth kind of or like was the efficiency of that going to actually play out? Or um, I just had every conversation I could, whether like Greg Miller was super generous with his time. I watched every old Michael Gold presentation from even like 15 years ago, the Tom Wall and Kathy Dice presentations from past chestnut growers meetings. And I learned so much before I ever planted a tree on land I had tenure on. I raised trees and on my back porch just to even see, like, understand growing out seedlings. And I think if you're signing up for something for multiple decades, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you don't first take some time to even just get some hands-on experience as much as is possible. Um, and then other than that, I think the thing I said earlier of just like taking on debt so that you can have the truck that says you're a farmer or the tractor that says you're a farmer is not a wise decision. And trying to spend as little money as you can and still be an effective farmer early on, I think is a really good way to reduce the amount of risk you're taking on. And in a long-term enterprise, not front-loading risk in your first 3 years with hopes that your year 7 yields are going to be what like the most bullish case that someone said on Facebook was going to be is a really good way to give yourself some safety. And then I'd just say always be conservative. Even if, there's some great number about what someone did in a bumper crop year in terms of chestnuts or something. There's also growers who will say, yeah, for any number of reasons, I lost my crop 2 years in a row or had 50% crops 3 years in a row. And basing your livelihood on the assumption that every year is going to go perfectly, I think is a very dangerous thing to do. So trying to find conservative numbers, overestimate cost, underestimate revenue, and still say, do I actually want to do this? That's my recommendation to young growers.
Yeah, great summary. Thank you. Thank you all. All right, I think now we'll move, maybe we have time for a couple questions from the audience. Right, yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Greg Miller. And I just want to sort of reiterate something that's been alluded to, and that is as we deal with this volume of chestnuts we're in the middle of a rapid increase and it looks like it's going to go for a while. How do we handle and market all that volume? And I think a really critical and important is that we maintain high quality, especially as we introduce, the crop to people who may have had a bad experience or no experience. It's important that they like what we sell. And up to this point, we've been able to get away with some shaky quality just because people were desperate for chestnuts. That's not going to be the case. And the internet's great for marketing, social media. If you get a bad post about your chestnuts, that can be devastating, even if it's not true. And so I think maintaining quality and the impression of quality that's going to be a critically important component for where we are now moving forward.
Your hand up. Aubrey.
We have a couple online questions, but I will start in order. The first one's for Stephanie. What is the make and model of the optical sorter that you guys use for hazelnut?
I don't know the make and model. I know it came from Texas. My brother is here. He might It's AMVT. It's a Texas company. I'm not sure the model. I'm sorry, but I'm happy to follow up if they want to reach out.
Thank you. And then we have one more. This is for the chestnut growers on the panel, so probably just Jeff and Russell. How do you guys manage to score large quantities of chestnuts?
Score, we do strictly by size. If they've made it to the score, we do not score. No, we sell whole fresh chestnuts. There are scoring machines. We've seen them. I know Michigan State has a big one, but yeah, we don't.
Yeah, if we mean score in terms of slicing, not like grading or giving it a score, the only time we're doing that is for market prep. And so we're doing, I think the most we did this year was maybe like 80 pounds ahead of market. And we did use a scoring machine that we imported, that we can definitely pass on the information for that. We had some communications with other growers, and I actually coordinated a bit with the Savannah Institute in terms of some of the equipment they were ordering as well, and landed on a machine that I believe was imported from China, that we have, and I can share that information if someone emails me, russell@breadtreefarms.com. I will say, in my personal experience, the cross scoring approach I find produces less than desirable results because the nuts dry out faster than a single slice. So I strongly prefer just one score across as opposed to two crosshatch scores, but that's just personal preference.
There's one, MJ.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being up here. This is a question mostly for the chestnut growers. Russell, I feel like you might be able to answer this best. I think there's something that doesn't always come up, but people that want to roast chestnuts really need to cure and dry out the chestnut so that it gets sweeter. You can't just roast like a really fresh chestnut. It's very starchy. Glenridge, you guys did a great job yesterday about talking about the moisture content needed for storing hazelnuts, but could any of you talk about the moisture content needed for chestnuts, maybe when you're first putting them into the fridge at Valley Chestnuts? And then also, maybe Russell, can you talk about what's the ideal for chefs or people that are cooking chestnuts, what you're telling them the moisture content should be?
We strive to keep our cooler at about 90% humidity. And one thing we've learned is wet isn't the same as humid. You don't want the nuts wet, but you need it in a very humid environment just so they maintain moisture. And part of our instructions when we mail out chestnuts is make sure people know they have to be cured. We've had complaints that from consumers, and we find out as you whittle down to it, they're not used to buying a fresh chestnut. They're used to buying something that's already cured. It's been sitting in the produce section for a month. But yeah, that's kind of, but we don't give recommendations on moisture content as they're cooked or anything, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, MJ. And we have done a bit of a synthesis on our conversations with more experienced growers in the country that's on our website. That's a whole like multi-page guide on storing and handling and what's the word I'm looking for? Preparation of chestnuts for roasting, for example. So if you go to breadtreefarms.com, that's a great resource. The kind of like pithy synthesis guidance that we give folks is same, that we recommend that the nuts should be out on their counter for 2 to 3 days before consumption, but otherwise they should be stored in the refrigerator. In terms of our like market roasting prep, where we know that we'll be roasting on a certain schedule, what we experienced this year was basically you could successfully roast nuts that hadn't cured but it required a longer duration of the low temperature aspect of the roast. So we basically do like almost like a reverse sear for those folks who like cooking steak, where we do a sustained low temperature cook and then increase the temperature for the last 10 to 15 minutes of that roasting process. And basically the low temperature duration needed to be longer for uncured nuts than for cured nuts was our experience, but you could still get that sweet flavor. It just took longer. So the switch we made for market prep was just to cure for 2 to 3 days prior to scoring. And then we would score like within 24 hours of the roasting happening. I think that answered MJ's question, but it's a really good but detailed question.
Okay, all right. Well, that will conclude this panel session. Thank you all so much again for your insights. Really appreciate it. And